at some point, conflict does translate into violence, and women are, affected by this. And when you talk of women now, when you're talking of women, sanitation, their well-being, and so on, there's so many silences in this discourse, and it doesn't come out in your study either, I don't think. I mean, for instance, menstrual waste, or things that people don't want to articulate in the public sphere, because these are things that are pushed, but they have consequences which are very, very dire, and don't figure anywhere in policy making. So that's the other thing, and the other issue that came out very forcefully is that water pipes, tanks, all these infrastructure are seen as masculinized, in the sense that it's the men who control them. Women, if they want water, if the hand pump dries up or whatever it is, have no access, because they don't know who to this thing. It'll have to be an engineer or a deputy this thing, or someone like that. So again, the structures in place, even in terms of delivering services, are already so gender unjust. So I think that is something. So when you, these are some of the points I wanted to highlight from this study, which I think can actually inform your suggestions, your policy recommendations. The other thing is, of course, this whole thing of how do you keep infrastructure going? And in Delhi, they do have a way of doing it in the resettlement colonies, and that is by contracting and subcontracting. But here you see the big gaps, because the contractors, there's no accountability. It's the contractor subcontracts it, and which is further subcontracted. So finally, the facility or the utility at the ground level, there's no accountability happening there. So people are absolutely without. So if there's no light bulb in a toilet facility, which is a major thing for a young woman wanting to use the toilet, say at 8 o'clock at night, then what do? There's no one to tell you what to do to light up that area, because there is all this subcontracting going on. So again, this whole question of accountability of the services is a huge thing that comes in. I think it is important when you, so if I were to look at your policy recommendations through the gender lens, which I'd like to do, I think it's rather sad that we have to depend on the police station and to have a hand pump in the police station to ensure safety of women, because it's a comment in itself. It means that the facilities that exist in the public space are not delivering. And I think if you are going to put this recommendation across, then you will have to at least qualify it and say that it's not the best solution. It may be the most pragmatic solution if you are living in the situation you are in these various colonies. So I think that needs to be underlined very, very strongly, because going to a police station to have a bath, and it's not the right thing. I know the police, in fact, have access to a lot of land. That is true. And they have huge compounds, and they have water facilities, and they have lots of things slums don't have. But at the same time, the important thing really is to fight for the facilities on the ground and the access of these women to the facilities on the ground. Regulating illegal alcohol sales is a very important idea, but it's very tough, because even women who have fought against alcoholism actually come across a lot of problems, because they themselves get targeted by a huge, the liquor mafia and so on at the local level. So people don't want to even articulate and take on these people. That's what happens. So we can recommend it, but the point is, finally, if there are, takers at the local level, what can such a suggestion do? I think one way of looking at all this is to actually get people, the poorest people, the women, the people who are discriminated by caste, people like them, empowered by asking them and getting them and putting information through to them about their own rights and entitlements and their ability to be able to transcend their situation. I think that is very important. So that is not here. Focus group discussions you've had in terms of process collection. But I would say that focus group discussions to get these ideas across is very important. that these women have it in them if they organize, they come together, they take on this thing, they demand things. And here, this is where this whole thing of budget accountability and looking at budgets carefully is very important. And in this study, for instance, in the study I cited earlier, there was kind of how much time does a woman spend collecting water, and how does that translate in actual cash? And how much, in opportunity costs, how does it work? I think these are things that need to be fed in if you have to show a certain dynamic of change that could be put in place. I think I'll stop there. I'm sure there'll be a discussion and we can take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivani and Denise, for what I consider. I didn't say it last time when I was making suggestions, but it is indeed a very challenging perceptive study. I haven't read the whole, but today's meeting certainly will motivate me to go through the entire study. You said it's 85 pages long. For me, as the pictures you showed along with the study, I think they were the stuff that should make us all die of shame. The subhuman conditions that you depicted, that we are discussing all these problems so clinically. Believe you me, I die 1,000 deaths every day living in India because I think it is one of the filthiest places in the world. And we've become so inured and immune to it, and especially the living conditions of the poor. I do hope that in your report you will publish these pictures in color, for all these pictures and more. And what occurred to me looking at those pictures, I'm glad you've been, concrete. Your study doesn't just hang loose. You've come up with concrete proposals. But in your attempt to be practical, which I understand there is need to be. So maybe some of the things I say may appear impractical to you, but I'm speaking out of sheer rage. And so maybe I'm not being very practical. But I think we can't afford to talk of modest solutions anymore. It's like Band-Aid for cancer and AIDS. The pictures that you showed, I would rather we bombed these places out of existence. I wish we had the guts to say, eliminate the poor. We can't even treat them better than pigs live in most countries in the world. Let's not even have them. But to go on and on like this with modest solutions and count JNNURM funds, we know what's happening with JNNURM funds. We saw what happened in Delhi. The pavements they made for CWG are already flying in the air. And we know, and especially when a senior officer, somebody who's worked at the highest positions in the government of India, it has the honesty to say, look, I know the government of India is useless. It's not going to do anything. And therefore, I don't know, you wasted your time, I sympathize with you. I think we should take him seriously. His lack of faith and confidence is shared widely by the people of India, and which is why the poor, the elite, are building gated communities, which is why you have all these on expressway gated communities where from water to electricity to sewage to everything is managed by corporate developers. And the poor are allowed to then rot away to whatever, oblivion. So I would seriously propose, looking at this, as I said, I'm thinking on the spot, but I would seriously pursue this idea, which is, I think the government of India should be persuaded to outsource municipal governance. I don't see why we can't invite, if we can invite Japan to come and build our metro, and it did a good job, and we collaborated with them, and we created a world-class facility, and you can see the metro effect. Even the poor don't spit pan or anything else in the metro. They're spotlessly clean. And unless we aim that kind of world-class facility for the poorest of the poor, things are not going to turn around. And I don't see if we can invite Japan to build metro, if we can outsource our defense procurement to all countries in the world. We're not Swadeshi about all our tanks and our missiles. I see no reason why Singapore or Germany shouldn't be come do what is their core competence, which is world-class facilities, world-class planning, hygiene, beautiful landscaping. I see no reason why all these basic things should be hostage to what we think is our democratic impulse. And let us accept that we Indians are meant for higher things. These lowly things like laying sewage pipes or water pipes and making sure the sewage doesn't get into, these are lowly, mundane things. We've always been told that we are meant for higher things, this culture. So all those higher pursuits is what we can. And the parliament can continue doing its big policy making, playing God. But these things, I may sound facetious, but believe you me, I'm dead serious. We just can't go on and on like this. And if for so much else, we accept that, we should work on our core competence and get the best expertise in the world, I see no reason why this should not be the case. And I now will come also, but I would like to comment on all the 6 recommendations you've made and add 1 or 2 of mine. Firstly, as I said, institutionalizing access to hand pumps, whether in police stations, given the fact, and as I said, if our aspirations are low, with due full respect to your hard work and your desperate, deep desire to be practical, what I'm trying to say is, let us not think with third world mindset. This is third world mindset. Few more hand pumps, put them in the police station. Pamela has already discussed that issue. Maybe in this area, women aren't afraid of going to police stations, but in most areas, I know police station is the last place a woman wants to go, leave alone to have a bath, even to register a case. And I'm so happy to know that you didn't find women complaining about the police, but it's not a solution that can be replicated anywhere in the world. And therefore, it's only for maybe 1, 2, maybe 10 slums, but it cannot really be. More importantly, given the abysmal sanitation standards that you showed us, where sewage is flowing freely, even in Delhi, I have seen how hand pumps, you're going to dig hand pump in highly polluted soil. The water, the subsoil water is already so filthy. And we shouldn't even think in terms of that as a solution. Hand pumps work where, your pump is near a good, clean water source. But it can't work on the side of a sewage, because come monsoon, we have seen what happens. These hand pumps also get submerged and sewage overflows, and what you're getting is sewage water. It happens even in Delhi, not just in poor, miserable, wretched Bihar. So I can't understand why we can't think of piped water supply, because that's the only way you can get clean water. Not that in Delhi we get clean water, but that's the only way if you really are serious about supplying water to the poor, which is clean, and all the backup arrangements. And, those nitty-gritties, how do you ensure high standards? As I said, I would ask Singapore or Germany or whoever is willing to do it for money. And there's a lot of money in it, by the way. Poor pays much more than you and I pay, Shivani, for water. In Delhi, for example, I find every street vendor pays 20 rupees per day or minimum 10 rupees per day for a few liters of water, which are supplied, which is just pumped out of the ground. It's not even AquaGuard water. It's just dug from the ground. So they are paying, and there's a lot of money to be made from it. And I'm sure for clean water they would pay. Secondly, now regulate illegal alcohol sales and increase. given that you rightly said this has become the biggest source of revenue, that's one part of the story, Dennis. The other part of the story, that this is also a way of patronizing political gundas. These auctions, politicians come and their touts, and they control these. You put a liquor vend anywhere near a village or near a basti, you have Gunda Raj there. So my solution is, again, you're right, prohibition doesn't work. I wouldn't say let's go that way. But I think maybe a serious All India campaign telling people manufacture your own with food grains, with fruits. You know, mahua liquor is much healthier. Liquors that are brewed at home and have been for millennia. Women brewed liquors even in India or anywhere in the world for themselves and for men of their family, and they were always healthier. The liquor that the government is giving to the poor is, by the way, industrial alcohol. Nowhere in the world is industrial alcohol se. शीरे से बनी है, sugar का जो शीरा, right? It's not grain based. Okay. Okay, it's alcohol, the leftovers of the filth from sugarcane extraction, right? No, in most countries, that alcohol is used as industrial alcohol. This is the point I was trying to make. In most countries of the world, that's used as industrial alcohol. We are using it for siphoning off a good part of the earnings of the poor by supplying liquor vends where water supply doesn't reach. And the point that I'm trying to make is that there should really be a wide-ranging campaign. That's what I would do if I had the slightest bit of power. I would go on television, give women recipes for safe alcohols, nutritious alcohol, and say, give this. And men will then sit at home and drink and not come home drunk with that poison which ruins their health. Now, infrastructure improvements, as I said, it can't be band-aid. It's just too serious a matter. Build more toilets, water pumps, that I've already dealt with in the larger this thing. Then, violence reduction strategy should not be based on containment, but rather more inclusive forms of prevention. And there, while you're right that the police is behaving relatively better now with the Nitish Kumar regime, but you can't count on one chief minister and his personal attention, and he might change his mind. You know, when chief ministers develop prime ministerial ambitions, they become different creatures, and we don't know whether Nitish will remain the Nitish that he was in his first term. Therefore, I think far-reaching police reforms, and I'm sure Uday you would agree with this, it's the crying need. And community policing. Today, it's not police that needs to keep a watch on citizens. It's the other way around. Citizens need to keep a watch on police stations. Do audit of what they are doing, how they are spending their time. Finally, regularizing, enforcing, and protecting land tenure and ownership. That's one part of the story. But equally important part of the story is ending government monopoly over land. That's what has inflated the price of land beyond the reach of even lower middle class and middle class in most cities. So buying a piece of land, or even, and this despite the fact that the little that I know of slums and how much people pay. In Delhi, for example, we did a small study just for satisfying my own curiosity as to what people are paying for living in miserable hovels by the roadside nalas and all. And I was, believe you me, shocked to find that per square foot they are paying more than I pay for my upper middle class accommodation, 3-bedroom house with a little lawn. Per square foot they're paying much more, and paying for every facility at a higher rate than I do. So it's not that the poor can't pay rents, they are paying. They're paying extortion money also. But it's the government's land monopoly over land, and land use change. the manner in which from agricultural land, if it is allowed to be developed, they don't allow it without lot of money exchanging hands, without politicians and thugs coming into the picture. And the moment those people come in to buy land, you know already the prices have shot up. So it's that which will, and then the rest, of course, I agree with the rest of it, which is regularizing, enforcing, and protecting land tenure and ownership, because with that foothold, the poor will begin then to invest in improving facilities. But I will conclude with what I started off with, which is, I think, outsource at least municipal governance. The other things we'll think about later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the panelists for their excellent conclusions. I won't repeat what they have said. I have got few points. I was just reading the summary. I have not read the document. But if I correctly understand, like you are testing a hypothesis that conflicts leading to violence, and basically the conflict is ingrained in the an atmosphere of non-inclusion or lack of inclusion. And I was reading that and you have referred to social, cultural and political mechanisms to address the problem. But the conclusions or the recommendations which were given, I think they are not in tune with the hypothesis you are telling. So I would suggest that what kind of social measures, the cultural measures, political measures you could take so that your conclusions or recommendations can be more systematic. I am not that pessimistic. I have read quite a lot on the aftermaths of British Industrial Revolution. In fact, my advisor, Professor Jeffrey Williamson, he wrote extensively on coping with city growth after the industrial revolutions. We all know that the cities in Britain, they were death chambers, and like the conditions of the poor, and in the 1600, 1700, they were so poor that they went for poor laws. We have seen New York, we have seen the Western countries. Every country in the world has gone through the problem of slums, and they have come out of this. If you look at the Singapore River in the 70s and the Korea, Seoul, that river in Korea, they were much worse than what we see Yamuna today. So I am not that diffident that the problems are bad, but they can be, with a suitable approach, we can address. I come from a state, my cadre is Andhra Pradesh. I have seen a different picture. I was myself the municipal commissioner of Hyderabad for 4 years. Anybody can go to Hyderabad. Some of these slums, their conditions are far, far superior than even the low-income localities. Of course, there were projects from the DFID, there was Andhra Pradesh services for urban poor, sites and services. So I would like to give some experience out of that. Now, when you come to your conclusions, I personally feel a very important fact we have seen in the successful models. Every model is not like what we see in Patna or what we see in Delhi slums. I have seen Kudumasri in Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, some in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and quite a number of, even Madhya Pradesh mixed. I have seen quite a number of areas where they have attempted to improve things and things have improved. One primary point I personally feel is the community. The community has to be strengthened, community has to mobilize, community has to be empowered, and the community has got capacity. they have got capacity of its own, even if they are uneducated, still they can distinguish between good and bad, they can distinguish between what is good for them, how they can control the, the family violence, social ills, there is possibility. Only thing is to enable them, to empower them so that they can address their problems with the support of the civil society and government. Now let me, I cannot understand because I myself went to Patna once in connection with the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, which I won't agree that it is a failure, it is a mixed success. And I have myself seen in near a flyover, Mr. Nitish Kumar had laid the foundation stone 2 years back, and that colony has not been constructed, very filthy conditions. I have not seen your pictures. I went to another slum, the work could not be started because the municipal corporators is a lady, municipal corporator's husband demanded money from the contractor. And these kind of situations are there, quite it is common in many places, but this can be taken care. Now let me just tell you, in JNNURM, Government of India, we allocated some 600 crores to Bihar. There are cities they have done, Bodh Gaya has done something, Patna has done this thing, but other places they could not do, mainly because of lack of education, lack of community mobilization, and the people who are getting good houses, they were not prepared to relocate even temporarily. I will give the example of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, every house under ISDP is a monumental work. The poor person himself has done and constructed extremely beautiful houses, putting 1 lakh rupees from out of his pocket, zero corruption, zero interference by any government official, they have been able to do. So I do not know why this, for example, if hand pump is a problem, if money is available, not only for hand pump, but also for sewerage, drainage, water supply, housing, forget about shelter, supposing they do not want to take. Incremental housing also, if the beneficiaries want to do the incremental housing, they can also do. I do not know why this is not done. I think this is one of the points. Like we have got large number of programs. State government is having, Government of India is having. Why it is not reaching? There is bureaucratic apathy, there is lack of information, there is lack of the community to demand good services. Both are supply and demand side factors. So I would request, if we want to reduce conflict, existing instruments like JNURM, looking at shelter, what we call residential vulnerability, social vulnerability, we have got old age pension, we have got widow pensions. For example, I have seen in Andhra Pradesh, on a particular day, 5th of the month, the old age pension reaches. I am not telling that Andhra Pradesh does not have corruption. I have seen Tamil Nadu it reaches. Why these pensions cannot reach social vulnerability? Why it cannot be widow pensions, physical handicapped? Recently I went to Andhra Pradesh. The state has taken care, the entire disabled, physically disabled, differently abled people in the entire state. It is a monumental effort. So therefore, why the social vulnerability programs, they are not reaching? Let us take occupational vulnerability. Money is overflowing. Say for example, skills training. Patna has done, I was told that Patna has done computer related training through some of the reputed institutions like Microsoft Foundation and NIIT. But the point is that perhaps what the poor require in these slums, that is not taken care. I can list out at least 20 programs which are available today from the central government, from the state government. They need to be carried to the people. Information is very key. I think the conclusions is very important, like about not only community, information, capacity Chetan referred, capacity of the then bureaucratic apathy, lack of commitment. If there is bureaucratic, same bureaucrats have been able to deliver in other states. Why they are not able to deliver in certain states? Because bureaucracy, there is no point in blaming, because bureaucracy is not an independent, we are grown in the political milieu. So therefore the same people are, so therefore we have to look into the political economy. So I would suggest that if you start with the hypothesis, you are testing the hypothesis, conflict leading to violence, and conflict can be taken by political, social, cultural measures, I think then systematically, I am little bit, I personally feel, being myself a researcher, the conclusions are not very connected to the study. So therefore, I would suggest, they are definitely good theory, but I would suggest they to be divided into like land issues, 50%, if the government is having 50% land, why the government can not settle the land tenure? In many states, land is not a problem, excepting Maharashtra, Delhi and other places, land is not a problem. Governments have given land, and we are now talking of property right to slum dwellers. It is a national announcement. So therefore, land, if 50% are there, and the land is tenable, it is not a park land or not a drain land or a river land, it is tenable, the land tenure problem can be solved. As far as the private lands are concerned, there are problems, but there are models to have partnerships. Then coming to the services, there is enormous number of schemes available to provide basics to the poor. If in spite of these schemes, still drainage is overflowing and the picture is, and we need to get another country to give land as a municipality, if that is situation, my point is that first let us see why that those schemes are not implemented. Then third, I pointed about the community mobilization. Fourth one is the capacity building. And fifth one is information. The sixth one is this commitment, it is not a overnight issue. I have seen in Bihar, the chief minister of the government has done hundreds of bridges with, in fact, no contractor was willing to just even the bid. So that has been done. I think things are improving. I would suggest that it requires a very multi-pronged strategy addressing the demand side, supply side, political, socio-cultural, bureaucratic, everything together so as to make an impact. Otherwise, it is a generic problem cannot be solved by specific instruments. But we know everything cannot be done. So therefore, we can think of an incremental approach. And as a part of this incremental approach, I would suggest the 20 schemes, perhaps had you met me earlier, I would have suggested, what is the outreach of these 20 schemes? If it is zero, I think that is the cause of that could have done a lot in addressing the issues of conflict. For example, Bihar, we have given enormous amount of money for low cost sanitation. Toilet is a basic right. Water pump is there is no dearth of money for water pumps, there is no dearth of money for toilets, there is no dearth of money for shelter, there is no dearth of money for skills, there is no dearth of money for social security. If they are not reaching, I think you should study why they are reaching in some states, why they are not reaching. That is the problem.
Do you think caste system has something to do?
Yes. Caste system, that could be
the caste system in Bihar?
See, for example, we all believe that once you go to the urban areas, the caste system dissipates. That is not correct. Because, so their caste system, but Bihar has got something positive.
Areas,
yes.
Even elite areas are so filthy. I mean, I live in one of the high-end areas, lines. Huh? And believe you me, I mean, you have open garbage piles, it's broken roads, sewage overflowing, even there. Tell me which area you can proudly display other than Lutyens Delhi and say, here is our model of urban management. Here we've created, even Dwarka, recently it was supposed to be Diplomatic Enclave Part 2 or something. Just look at footpath nahi hai. I mean, how many of your cities even have such a simple thing like a footpath? And you know that 48% of those who die are pedestrians because there's no safe place for them to walk. So you fell into a pit today and you do live in an elite college. So let us not just make it out to be a case of caste prejudice. Of course that.
It's the
And
biggest problem in India.
biggest, there are too many. There are too many biggest problems. But the point that I'm trying to make is, don't pass it on to caste. Maybe it is the curse of untouchability on us that we treat those who clean our cities or homes as untouchable. It is maybe the overall curse of untouchability. But even our elite areas are not good. Yesterday, I mean, my phone has photographs. Day before yesterday, I was in the court complex in Saket, new district court center. Very fancy building from outside. Just go look at their toilets. Yesterday, I was lecturing at the Delhi School of Economics, the most elite institution in the country. I again had to take photographs of filthy toilets, broken down taps, everything. You don't, except for five-star hotels, tell me, where do you find, even in the Supreme Court of India, do you find clean toilets easily? No, you don't. Sorry? Institute of Economic Growth. So, public toilet, the day we can learn to keep our public toilets clean. No toilets in the metro. Or garbage management. I'm saying these are mundane things. We just think they're too mundane for us. But we don't do it. So it's not just caste system. Because if you can't keep your own front yard, not even backyard clean, then you ought to die of shame.
Point the delivery of the services, one experience of my 5 years in this mission, wherever there is tenure of the people, there are good people, they have delivered. I think in case of Patna, I have seen Bihar, actually in 5 years there must have been 6-7 officers. That may be one of the things like apart from bureaucratic apathy.
Yeah, you're right. The moment somebody starts delivering, transfer him. You punish people who do good work.
And another thing also, like we get a government that we ourselves deserve. I saw in Hyderabad, people were paying.
In Hindi, the saying is Yatha Raja Tatha Praja.
But I saw in Hyderabad.
English, it's all twisted.
Okay, in Hyderabad I saw very top class hotels and hospitals. They were paying like 25 rupees per square feet as the tax. We increased the tax almost 300%. Services improved. Today we don't pay taxes, like, that is also another, you don't provide good services, that's why you don't get good taxes. If you don't get good taxes, you don't provide services. So it is a vicious circle.
No, I just wanted to maybe pursue in this direction or not, but because I know the constraints one has to do when you do academic research, and at the same time you're funded and you need to do policy recommendations, etc., etc. You say urban conflicts and poverty reduction. I mean, listening to what we've been hearing this afternoon, very interesting. I would say that maybe poverty reduction will happen if there's much more conflicts. And what would you, if this maybe would be a position that you would have, would you put it, or how would you phrase it? Because in many ways, empowering community, etc., at the end of the day means, having many more conflicts in India. And maybe that's the route, not conflict reduction, conflict increase.
I'm talking from the point of view of a recent Global Bihar Summit, where I was there on the panel on additional resource mobilization and raising resources for the state government finances. And so I would only comment on this whole point about regulation of illegal alcohol and the point that was made about increasing tariffs in alcohol. It's a very catch-22 situation in good taxation that on the one hand, in order to increase your base of taxation and get more tax and revenues for the state government, you have to liberalize the regime. And in the case of Bihar in particular, there is a logical case for liberalization of and therefore less regulation on Indian-made foreign liquor, while increased regulation on local alcohol. And that is the catch-22 situation which needs to be tackled on the ground, because revenue from alcohol in each and every state is always a major source of revenue. And I remember in my previous avatar in CRISIL, as in the state government ratings, the classic case of Andhra Pradesh, when prohibition on alcohol led to decline in revenues, and we successfully argued, I was doing the Andhra Pradesh rating, government rating that time, for bringing down the rating of Andhra Pradesh state government to the extent that Chandrababu Naidu then had to call up the CRISIL MD to maintain the balance. Thank you.
First of all, thanks a lot for your feedback. This has been most interesting. Just a few points that I wanted to make based on what the panelists have suggested. Ms. Kishwar, I completely agree with you that we need an extremely, a very, very extremist sort of application that should happen, because the situation is really bad. However, having gone to the slums and talked to the people, they have asked for very immediate solutions. So while I agree with you, there are water pumps, there are toilets. Unfortunately, there's so much embezzling of money going on, especially among the local leaders. And we talked to the slum people over there, and they said this very openly. So there are toilets, there are hand pumps, but the pipe is not long enough to go through. So because there's been some sort of problem that has happened, finances have been redistributed among the rich, the comparatively richer off. So wherever we went, they all said that we want toilets, even though there were toilets. We want hand pumps, even though there were hand pumps. They were not functioning. So perhaps the immediate solution would be just to deal with that, and then, of course, to go on to the structural solution, which is what we have suggested in the policy recommendations. That you go on with the most immediate and most plausible, high likelihood, and then go on to the structural issues, which I agree with you completely need to be addressed. So as Professor Mohanty has said about the incremental approach, I agree that it has to be done gradually with the aim of long-term solutions in mind. And the other aspect that I just wanted to bring up was the PMC. Its budget for urban development has increased a lot, and still, nothing is happening. And a lot has probably got to do with this local level embezzling of money that is happening in the slums. And lastly, people did go to the police on many occasions, but the police, as we have mentioned, very discriminately react to things, and that has a rich and poor angle to it. So maybe land does not attract the attention because, they feel like they're getting money out of it, whereas other things they feel like they should contain. So this discriminatory reaction of the police is also something that I think we need to, and which is where I completely agree with what has been said about reform of police reforms, as well as better reporting of crime, better registering of crime, which is not happening at the moment. Thanks a lot.
Right. Sorry, not quite dinner yet. I want to just make 5 quick points. I think the first one to say is one of the things that we've approached with the study is, we've got to be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, although the so-called Patna miracle clearly has a dark side to it, there are also many positive things there. And one mustn't sort of lose sight of that. And I think this is quite important, particularly when we're discussing whether or not politicians are serious about doing things. I mean, with a few exceptions, you do not have politicians who do not have their own interest at heart. The question is, how do you harness those interests in order to make them also work for a majority? And I think I will quite happily get up and defend Nitish Kumar versus kind of Lalu Prasad Yadav in certain domains, not in all, but in certain domains. However, the dark side of the Bihar crime miracle is that what we've shown, I think, is that there are dual standards of law and order in Patna and Bihar right now. I mean, there's a standard of law and order for the rich and a standard of law and order for the poor. And this raises these key questions about social justice and whose city is it and how society should be structured. What should be the relationship between rich and poor, between powerful and powerless? Should we be giving more advantage to the powerless or the dispossessed? Now, these, in some ways, to pick up Marie-Hélène's kind of comment, existing programs, such as JNRM, have not actually changed the situation on the ground in terms of challenging these structural differences. So in one sense, why try continuing with these existing programs? Let's try something else. The problem with the kind of radical solution you're proposing, which is effectively a call to revolution, shall we say, but the revolutions, of course, have a way of being rather unpredictable in their outcomes and the way they unfold. And very often, I mean, I do a lot of work in a country which underwent an amazing revolution, Nicaragua, which had a revolution which really, certainly for a number of years, had the people at heart and would really change their lives. But as revolutions, as political processes, just as any form of politics, after a while fossilize and institutionalize. Now, so I think we have to be careful here. I mean, I think we can agree that violence, yes, sometimes serves a purpose, is a tool to changing the world, but at the same time, it's not something which is easily controllable, and it can get out of control, and one must always be looking for other solutions. Now, what I will grant here, and this is borrowing from gender theory, I mean, we have taking the distinction between practical and strategic needs. I mean, we have tried to sort of think about more practical approaches here, because, and I speak here as an academic. As an academic, I love strategic needs. I love the idea of thinking about the big, broad, how we must change society, we must change the fundamental political economy. I work in a continent which has the highest levels of inequality in the world. Nicaragua, the country I work in, is an oligarchy where the elite controls the state in such a way that its taxation regime is regressive. The country's Gini index goes up after taxation. It goes from 0.51, which is already very high, to 0.69, which is massive. Now, that, as far as I'm aware, doesn't completely happen in India. You haven't reached a stage where the state's taxation regime is actually taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich. So I think, in that sense, let's not throw the baby out of the bathwater and think that, in India and in Bihar, there are things we can work with. And if we can't change everything at once, let's at least start putting in place conditions which might lead to further change. And I think if, in some ways, our kind of modest contribution can be part of a broadening a debate and opening up and sort of pushing the agenda a bit forward, then we'll be, I think, very happy with it. But thank you very much for your comments and everyone for your contributions.
We can proceed to dinner, which is outside. Thank you.
Of course, there's been a tremendous change from what used to be called the Tata days and what it is now, naturally.
क्वालिटेटिव मेथड्स बेसिकली सोशल साइंसेज के पर्सपेक्टिव